The wreckage on Argon 6. Lieutenant Jack Vance awoke to the sharp tang of ozone and a dull throb in his leg. The crash had come fast. One moment, he was monitoring the Terran survey ship Pathfinder. The next, he was plummeting through an alien atmosphere, alarms screaming. He'd fought the controls until the final moment, then nothing. Now he was sprawled in the mud of a jungle floor, half buried in moss and scorched foliage. Birds, or something like birds, called overhead. The sky was a sickly green. Jack blinked up at it, grimaced, and sat up with a grunt. Still breathing, he muttered, "That's a start." His suit's readouts were fried. No NAV, no comms. He checked his injuries: sprained ankle, bruised ribs, gash on his forehead. He could move, at least. He limped away from the crash site with nothing but a flask of emergency rations and a sidearm that may or may not work. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The jungle was a blur of color and heat, thick with buzzing life and alien scents. Jack staggered through vines and undergrowth until his legs gave out by a shallow spring. He drank greedily, then collapsed beside it. When he opened his eyes again, it was to the sight of a face hovering above his. Large, gold-flecked eyes stared into his. Smooth, iridescent skin the color of moonlight shimmered in the sun. She was humanoid, but not human. Limb proportions too long, cheekbones too sharp, and her fingers were tipped with glimmering scales. Jack tried to sit up, but a soft, three-fingered hand pushed him down. The alien girl cocked her head. "You're not one of the jungle beasts," she said, voice musical and strange. "But you're definitely swelling." He blinked. "What?" She gestured toward his groin with mild concern. "Your central region is inflamed. Are you in pain?" Jack followed her gaze, realization dawning in slow, mortified horror. He'd fallen unconscious, soaking wet, in heat and stress, and of course, his body had responded involuntarily. And now this alien girl thought he had a medical emergency. I can explain," he stammered. But she wasn't listening. With an air of medical precision, she reached down and touched it. Jack yelped, half in surprise, half in confused alarm. The contact was gentle, but thoroughly inappropriate. No, listen, it's not a parasite," he blurted. "It's supposed to do that. It's normal." "Kind of." The alien froze, hand hovering, eyes wide. "You mean this is intentional?" Jack groaned and covered his face. "Not exactly intentional. It just happens. Look where I come from. It's biological. Nothing's wrong. Please stop touching it." Karina, though Jack wouldn't learn her name until later, pulled her hand back slowly, clearly bewildered. "I thought it was an infected growth. I was going to apply a healing field. It seems I've aggravated the condition." "You could say that," Jack muttered. They stared at each other in awkward silence. Then, surprisingly, the alien girl chuckled, a bright, chime-like sound. "You're a curious creature," she said. "Most beings don't swell in that manner unless stung by a seal-there beetle." Jack managed a weak smile. "Well, I'm full of surprises." Karina stood and offered her hand. "Come. You shouldn't stay here. There are predators in this region. I will take you to my outpost." He hesitated, then accepted the help. Her grip was strong, her touch unexpectedly warm. As she supported him to his feet, she glanced down at the still visible bulge in his flight suit. "Does it retract on its own? Or must it be soothed?" Jack turned scarlet. "It'll take care of itself. Trust me." As they walked, Jack limping, Karina supporting, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of world he'd landed on. One where reptilian alien girls mistook erections for infections and seemed entirely unbothered by the confusion. It was going to be a hell of a recovery mission. And possibly, he thought with a lopsided grin, the weirdest first contact story in human history. Healing chambers and hidden weapons. The fiery outpost shimmered like a pearl nestled in the jungle. It wasn't a structure in the Terran sense, no walls or beams, but rather an organic growth, almost plant-like, that had been shaped and psionically hardened into domes and walkways. The material felt warm under Jack's boots, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Karina led him inside, ignoring the glances of her fellow Thyri. They stared at Jack with the cautious wonder one might reserve for a talking plant or a particularly bold predator. His presence clearly rattled them. He didn't blame them. He was limping, bleeding, and human. That last one seemed to be the biggest problem. "I'm not contagious, you know," he said as they passed a cluster of tall, willowy thyri whispering in their musical language. Karina glanced at him. "They've never seen a male before. We assumed your species was asexual or engineered." "Not quite. We're balanced," Jack said, then winced. "That's not the word. We have two sexes, male and female." Karina tilted her head. "You mean your species splits biological roles between genetic carriers and seeders?" Jack blinked. "That's one way to put it." She led him into a circular chamber where soft vines curled into reclining pods. The air smelled of mint and ozone. "Sit," she said. "The chamber will mend what your internal field cannot." Jack lowered himself onto the pod. It adjusted under his weight with a gentle hum. Light surrounded him in a warm cocoon, and the ache in his ribs began to fade. Karina knelt nearby, her eyes on the makeshift bandage on his arm. "You tied this with plant fiber and sealed it with," she sniffed it, "tree sap." "Best I could do. My medkit was toasted in the crash." Jack shrugged. "Humans improvise." She looked almost impressed. "You adapted quickly." Jack met her gaze. "I've been dropped into worse. Once had to survive a Martian sandstorm with just a tarp and a roll of duct tape." Karina blinked. "What's duct tape?" Jack grinned. "Miracle substance. Holds ships, lives, and occasionally friendships together." Karina chuckled. The sound was lighter this time, less awkward. She stood and gestured for him to follow. "Come, there's something I want to show you." The next chamber was darker, lit by slow-moving pulses in the walls. Karina waved her hand, and a central table rose, displaying holographic blueprints of the crashed Pathfinder. The ship's frame was scattered across the jungle, its reactor still partially intact. "This is from the energy trace we picked up after the crash," she explained. "Your vessel bled power into the soil. That's how I found you." Jack studied the projection. He tapped a glowing section. "That's the main comm relay. If I can salvage the memory core, I can send a burst signal to orbit. Maybe a rescue ship will hear it." Karina looked concerned. "If your signal reaches orbit, others might hear it too. Predators. Warlords." Jack nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to make sure they're not the ones who answer." He studied the room, noticing strange tools on the walls. Organic spines, glowing lenses, crystalline rods. Alien tech, too delicate to be weapons, but full of potential. "Can I use some of these?" he asked. "I've got an idea. If I can combine your resonators with some of my ship's metal." "You're going to build something," Karina interrupted, amused. "You remind me of a Glenth pup." "Oh, what now?" She mimed a small creature pawing at rocks. "Curious. Constantly rebuilding its nest." Jack shrugged. Better than dying bored. Together, they spent hours in the workshop. Jack fashioned crude signal amplifiers and spliced human circuit boards into thyri resonant crystals. Karina, intrigued, offered guidance and occasional bursts of psionic energy to stabilize components. They argued about voltage, laughed over misfires, and cursed the stubbornness of both their tech. Eventually, Jack leaned back, exhausted but proud. "It's ugly, but it might work." Karina studied the device, then him. "You shape chaos into function. That's rare." Jack wiped his brow. "You give me the materials, I'll build the bridge." Humamoto. Before Karina could reply, a low hum filled the outpost. An alert. She stiffened. "A long-range vessel just entered our atmosphere." "Not Thyri." Jack stood slowly. "Then it's probably not friendly." Karina narrowed her eyes at the growing noise. "You may get a chance to build more than bridges, Jack Vance." He nodded grimly. "Let's hope duct tape works on war." When the hunters come, the sky darkened before the storm. But it wasn't weather. The clouds split open like a wound as a sleek, black vessel pierced the atmosphere above the Thyri outpost. Its silhouette was dagger-shaped, its descent too fast, too aggressive to be anything but hostile. Karina stood at the edge of the canopy, jaw tight. Karnak, scavenger war clan. They hunt for wrecks, strip survivors for parts and trophies. Jack's stomach sank. They're here for my ship. And you, she said grimly. The jungle was already reacting. Birds scattered, leaves curled in defense, and a low, pulsing fear rolled through the fiery collective like distant thunder. They weren't soldiers. They were scholars, scouts, builders. Their defense systems were built to deter wildlife, not combat a raiding party. Jack cracked his knuckles. Then we don't wait. We prepare. Karina looked at him. You face them, not them, but close enough. Pirates, mercenaries, rogue AIs. All the same, bully tactics and big guns. They expect easy prey. He strode toward the center of the outpost and called over his shoulder, time to disappoint them. Over the next 2 hours, the outpost became a battlefield in progress. Under Jack's direction, Karina and a few brave fiery volunteers repurposed their psionic field generators into shield amplifiers. He stripped resonators and redirected them to form a high-frequency perimeter disruptor, something the Karnak's tech might misread as unstable terrain. They dug trenches between the soft-rooted walkways and planted sharpened crystal spires. They rerouted vines to form traps and alarms. Jack even mounted a salvaged energy coil from the Pathfinder into a hand cannon, so heavy it made his shoulder ache just looking at it. Karina watched him in silence for a moment, then said, "You change everything you touch." Jack glanced at her. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. As dusk fell, the hum of the Karnak vessel deepened. Then silence. They've landed, Karina said. Jack nodded. Then they'll come on foot. Fast. Loud. Expecting a quick harvest. He handed her a small psionic flare they'd modified into a blinding flash grenade. If they breach the shield, use this. Blind them. I'll take the shot. Karina accepted it, her fingers brushing his. She didn't pull away. Why are you helping us? She asked quietly. Jack paused. Because I've seen what happens when you don't fight back. The universe doesn't hand out mercy. You take it. You build it. Or you're just a footnote in someone else's conquest. Karina held his gaze, then gave a single nod. Then let's not be a footnote. The first Karnak hit the traps just after nightfall. There was no preamble, no warning. One moment, the jungle was quiet. The next, a hulking, armor-plated warrior crashed through the foliage, only to be skewered by a pair of crystal spikes hidden beneath a collapsing path. His screech echoed through the canopy. Jack was already moving, rifle raised. Here we go. A squad of 4 Karnak emerged next, their exosuits humming with energy. They moved like predators, fast and heavy. Their weapons pulsed with plasma. Karina triggered the first charge. A blast of psionic energy surged through the clearing, stunning the lead too. Jack didn't hesitate. He dropped them with precise shots to the chest plates. The remaining 2 snarled and fired. Jack dove behind a root wall, the bark searing beside his head. Karina returned fire with a resonant lance, the sound wave knocking one Karnak off his feet. The last one charged straight for Jack. Jack stood, aimed his cannon, and pulled the trigger. A blue-white beam tore through the raider's chest, sending him crashing backward into the undergrowth. Then, silence again. Jack's breathing slowed. Smoke curled from his weapon. Karina emerged from cover, eyes scanning. That wasn't all of them. No, Jack agreed. That was the scouting team. As if on cue, a deep, rumbling roar shook the ground. From beyond the trees, a new figure approached, twice the size of the others, with massive armor plating and a pulse cannon built into one arm. The war leader, Karina whispered. Jack's muscles tensed. You have that flare. Karina held it up. Throw it on my mark. The Karnak brute roared again, raising his cannon. Now, Karina hurled the flare. A pulse of blinding white light lit up the jungle like a star going nova. The brute staggered. Jack charged, firing the cannon one last time. The beam struck dead center. The war leader collapsed in a smoking heap. When the dust cleared, the jungle was still again. The outpost stood, battered but unbroken. Karina approached Jack, her scales shimmering with sweat and light. You were right, she said. They expected prey. Jack wiped blood from his brow. They got to fight. They looked out over the battlefield, where Thyri volunteers were tending to the wounded and dismantling Karnak gear. Karina spoke quietly. You changed us. We fought today because of you. Jack glanced at her, exhaustion in his eyes, but a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. And I'm not done yet. Signal in the dark. The outpost smelled of smoke and ion burn. The battle was over, but the aftermath lingered. Charred vines, shattered crystals, and scorched trenches cut deep through the once pristine jungle floor. The Thyri moved quietly, with the solemn grace of people who had survived but not unscathed. Jack sat alone on a low ledge near the psionic workshop, his makeshift pulse rifle resting beside him. He cradled a dented transmitter in one hand. It sparked now and then, pulsing with a flicker of life. Come on, you stubborn bastard, he muttered. Just give me one clean burst. A soft sound approached. Jack looked up to see Karina, her long silver skin marked with soot and sweat, a faint gash along one cheek. She carried a bundle wrapped in translucent fabric. You should rest, she said. Jack offered a tired smile. I could say the same. She handed him the bundle. Your tools. The amplifier crystal survived. Jack opened the fabric and let out a slow exhale. The crystalline core gleamed faintly, undamaged. It's enough, he said. I can work with this. Karina sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The jungle murmured around them, wind whispering through treetop vents, carrying the scent of damp ash and alien flowers. Finally, Jack broke the silence. I've been stranded before. Once, near Enceladus. But there was always the hope someone was listening. Karina looked at the transmitter. And now? Jack shrugged. Now it's not just about getting home. If the Karnak found this planet, others will too. If I don't warn them, Earth, the patrol fleets, this place could be strip mined before anyone realizes it's alive. She studied him. You think like a protector, for a world not yours. I think like someone who's seen what conquest does. Karina tilted her head. And if no one hears you? Jack smiled grimly. Then I stay. Help rebuild. Teach your people how to fight. How to resist. She was quiet for a moment. You give up your stars. Jack looked out at the jungle. Not give up. Trade one sky for another. Karina reached out and rested a hand on his shoulder. Then you won't be alone. By morning, the outpost had begun to shift. Walls were reinforced. Traps were reset. Karnak armor was repurposed into plating for defense platforms. Thyri architects began to reshape their living structures with harder angles, fortified cores. In the heart of it all, Jack and Karina stood over a half-buried console wired with both human and alien tech. This is the best signal strength I can get without frying the core, Jack said. But it's a narrow burst. One shot. Karina nodded. Then we must choose the right moment. Jack hesitated. If I send coordinates, Earth could arrive with warships. Not all Terrans are diplomats. Karina's eyes met his. And not all Thyri are afraid anymore. Jack considered that, then pressed a final key. The transmitter hummed, a deep-throated resonance. The crystals lit up, casting blue fire across the ground. A thin beam shot upward, disappearing into the green-tinted sky. Now we wait, Jack said. Days passed. Repairs continued. Jack found himself teaching Thyri scouts how to move in squads, how to think like hunters instead of prey. He translated Terran tactics into psionic metaphors Karina's people could grasp. In return, they taught him to hear the jungle, its pulses, its moods, to sense danger not through sight, but through resonance. Karina stayed close. They spoke often of war, of stars, of the strange accident that had brought him here. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. Then, one night, the sky changed. A new light blinked on the horizon, blue and artificial. Not Karnak. Jack raced to the ridge, Karina beside him. High above, a sleek vessel orbited. Terran markings gleamed on its hull. Rescue, Jack breathed. They heard me. Karina's expression was unreadable. You could leave, she said softly. Return to your kind, to your sky. Jack stared upward, then looked at her. I could, but... Jack exhaled. But maybe I've already found where I belong. When the rescue shuttle descended, Jack stood beside Karina at the landing zone. The Terran commander stepped out in full armor, surveying the alien outpost with wary eyes. Lieutenant Vance, you're a hard man to track. Jack grinned. Good to see you too, Captain. Ready to come home? Jack glanced at Karina, at the Thyri workers reconfiguring the shield pylons with newfound confidence. Then back at the captain. Actually, Jack said, I've got a new assignment. Right here.